I want to bring in the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren. I want to start with this new reporting that we were just discussing with Alex from the New York Times. What does this mean to the people of Israel if, as the New York Times is reporting, that the government knew about the Hamas attack plan more than a year ago?
Well, good to be with you, Olivia. The report doesn't say that the government knew. It says news that the army knew. We don't know how high up the chain of command that information went. But it's going to be part of an investigation that will follow this war. And it'll be a very thorough and far-reaching investigation. And everybody will be investigated, including the military, including the government echelon. Clearly, there was an intelligence failure here of a magnitude of October 1973 at the outset of the Yom Kippur War, where there were people in the intelligence community who warned about an impending Arab invasion, and those warnings weren't taken seriously. Mm-hmm. You know, just personally speaking, I was in the government and I was involved in the Gaza issue. We all thought that, that Hamas wore two hats. It sort of wore a terrorist hat, but it also wore a governance hat. It was the de facto governance of Gaza, and that Hamas could be incentivized to wear the governance hat more than the terrorist hat by giving them a lot of Qatari money, and we're talking about a lot of money, plus allowing about 20,000 Gazan workers into Israel every day to work. That gives Hamas something to lose. So it wasn't just that people in the government were sort of underestimating the military prowess of Hamas, but really thinking that Hamas could be induced to be something else than what it was, which is a terrorist organization.
Well, and you were right to state that we don't know if the whole of government of Israel knew. The Times says it is uncertain that this reporting could not indicate whether Netanyahu knew or not. But I mean, wouldn't that be a failure in and of itself for something like this to not go up to the highest levels, considering, I mean, according to the Times, you have an analyst who is raising the alarm bell saying, we're seeing Hamas fighters training exercises that match exactly what is in this blueprint that we have. They're using the same words that are in this blueprint. Why wouldn't that have gone up to the top levels of the government?
Well, again, I can say as someone who spent a lot of time in the military and a lot of time in government, you get a lot of warnings of this nature in Israel. We are in a terrible neighborhood and surrounded by enemies on all sides. And so warnings are coming in every day and, frankly, all night. And there's a lot of fog, and you have to see through the fog and see, okay, what is the real threat here? And it's not always easy. This is not to exonerate or forgive anybody. Clearly, there was a serious intelligence failure here, but just give you a sense of the complexity of these issues. I must say also that I'm a little disturbed by this report, not just because of what it says about the intelligence failure, but it seems to me already part of the, sort of the back and forth, that political back and forth about who is going to respond, who's going to be responsible for this intelligence failure, whether it's going to be the military or the government. Obviously, somebody gave this report to the New York Times, and I have to ask myself, what was the motivation behind that person in doing so?
Right, but that aside, I mean, it is important reporting to understand, what was known, what wasn't known before this horrific attack on October 7th. I want to talk to you about moving forward as we look at these next few hours. We don't know if this truce is going to hold, right? It is right down to the wire. So that means that Israeli military operations could start back up right after. The Biden administration has urged Israel to be more surgical with its military operations once the truce ends to limit civilian deaths. So far, the Hamas-controlled Palestinian Health Ministry says more than 14,000 civilians have died, many of them women and children. Here's what Secretary of State Antony Blinken said today. Let's listen.
Before Israel resumes major military operations, it must put in place humanitarian civilian protection plans that minimize further casualties of innocent Palestinians by clearly and precisely designating areas and places in southern and central Gaza where they can be safe and out of the line of fire.
Do you expect Israel to be receptive to these demands?
I think Israel's always been receptive to these demands, and they actually don't even have to be made as a demand. Israel, both on the moral plane, we have no interest in causing civilian deaths among the Palestinians, but also on the strategic level. Keep in mind, the more Palestinians who are hurt by the fact that they serve as human shields for Hamas, that actually creates political pressures on us to agree to a ceasefire. Right? It's actually a boomerang. And a ceasefire means Hamas wins. It means Hamas gets away with mass murder. It means 250,000 Israelis can't go back to their homes because they've been removed from those homes. They wouldn't go back if Hamas can reorganize and launch further strikes. And that's precisely what the leaders of Hamas said they're going to do. So it is not in Israel's strategic interest to increase the number of Palestinian casualties. Israel will do its utmost to limit those casualties, but it's going to be difficult because Hamas is going to continue to hide behind them and use them as shields. And we will try to be as surgical as humanly possible. At the end of the day, we're fighting a vicious enemy who doesn't care anything about the lives of Palestinians, nothing.
But so you say that Israel has been receptive to U.S. demands, but clearly the Biden administration doesn't believe it has been receptive enough or hasn't been following it enough. And we know that per what the IDF has said in testimony that they have been using dumb bombs, which they say is to get to the tunnels there in Gaza. That Hamas uses. Dumb bombs, though, are more indiscriminate, right? They kill more people. They're not surgical. So clearly the Biden administration believes that it could be doing more to limit those civilian deaths. And do you worry that Israel's mission to destroy Hamas, in the way that it is carrying this out with more than 14,000 deaths, could actually backfire by, radicalizing more people to sympathize with Hamas and then join its ranks?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just take issue with the 14,000. That's a statistic put out by Hamas. And let's be very straight about that. And Hamas routinely inflates its numbers. We know that. We know they conflate the number of Palestinian terrorists who have been killed in that number, as well as the significant number of Palestinians who've been killed by Palestinian rockets that fall short. About 30% of their rockets fall short and fall on Palestinian neighborhoods. We all remember what happened to the Al-Ahli hospital several weeks ago. So, yes, any casualties, doesn't matter what the number, civilian casualties are too many, and it's in Israel's interest, as I said, morally and strategically to limit that. Keeping in mind we're dealing with a densely populated and densely built up area, and Hamas is under that area with over 300 miles of tunnels. Can you imagine what this is like for a military to try to remove that threat? At the end of the day, Israel has to remove that threat. We cannot live as a country. And we will have to make some very difficult choices about the hostages. I don't know how long these truces can go on. We're trying our best to get as many women and children out of the hands of Hamas. But at the end of the day, let's be clear. Hamas will not give up all the hostages. The hostages are the get out of Gaza free card for the Hamas. And they know that once they give up the last of those hostages, Israel then could flood those tunnels. It could set those tunnels afire. We can't do that as long as there are hostages there. Perhaps we can reach a situation where, please, go ahead. Oh,
go ahead. No, you're talking about the hostages. I want to follow up on that because Hamas released this video of Yarden Bibas today. He is the father of a 4-year-old and 10-month-old. And just yesterday, Hamas claimed, without any evidence, we should note, that the boys and their mother were killed by an Israeli airstrike. Now, CNN has no evidence of their deaths or the airstrike that Hamas is claiming. We are not showing the video of Yarden, but we do have an image from it that we have showed. And that image in this video, it shows Yarden begging Israeli officials to bring him and his family home. Michael, what impact does a video like the one of Yarden Bibas have on the families of these hostages?
Well, it's not the video. It's actually the whole story of the Bibas family, which has become sort of emblematic for Israelis generally. If you notice that the demonstrations calling for the release of all the hostages have orange balloons, and that's a reference to the redheaded children here. And we don't know, we can't verify whether Hamas has claimed that most of the family, except for the young woman, girl, has been killed. We know in the past that Hamas has said that hostages have been killed. We found the bodies of 2 women who allegedly, according to Hamas, had been killed by an Israeli airstrike, but forensic evidence showed that they were alive and that they had been executed by Hamas. So we don't know. Olivia, if I could, I don't think I responded to your question, and I wanted to get to it. Will Israel be, sort of risking creating another generation of terrorists through its military activities in Gaza? Shall I answer that?
Yes, go for it. We'll make time.
Yeah, go for it. Okay, thank you. Because it's an important point, and it comes out often. It simply is this. First of all, if every time a country went to war against an evil enemy, the United States in World War II thought it would create more Nazis by destroying Nazi Germany, then the United States would never have gone to war against Nazi Germany. And every time we've gone to war in the Middle East, and we've gone to war quite frequently since our founding in 1948, yes, we risk creating another generation of terrorists, but we have no option, of course. This is our option. We have to live. But the opposite, the positive side of this whole process is that every once in a while, people in the Middle East will internalize that war is not the way. You could get an Anwar Sadat in Egypt, and Egypt made war against us 4 times, wars of national destruction. Jordan made war twice, wars of national destruction, and King Hussein internalized that this wasn't the way, and we made peace. And we made peace with the signatories of 4 Arab countries who are part of the Abraham Accords. So it's not true that continued war always going to create generations that want to wage war. Some generations will wake up and say, maybe this is not the way to get a better future for our children and grandchildren. And that's the hope here. At the same time, we're going to have to continue to defend ourselves.
All right, Michael Oren, thank you for coming on to offer your perspective and analysis.